Okay. That started nicely. And then we're gonna wrap back over here to the fuel filter. And in a second, I'm just gonna wrap a zip tie right here to kind of hold everybody above the lowest part of the car. But I don't want to do that yet because I got to get to this fitting on the fuel accumulator first, so I can figure out what size hose. Okay, that went on nice and clean. And this will terminate with a banjo fitting. It's just about perfect there at the eye in barricade. And I didn't bring anything to cut with. Okay, I said the eye in barricade. Let me slip the clamp up here. And that will do.
The birds have hatched.
I'm just gonna make conversation so my wife realizes I'm filming, since she just came home and wants to tell me about the birds. Okay, so we kind of have everything in place. I'm tightening up this special fuel injection clamp. I don't really like it. I'll probably come back later with some of the crimps, but I forgot to bring any crimp clamps of this size home, so this will have to do for now. Okay, that's everything plumbed up. Now we just gotta kind of zip tie things up to make it neater and prettier. Oh, that went fast. And now I've got to do the wiring, which is right here. I'm just going to use one, and then I'll probably throw some heat shrink or something on the others to keep that from degrading. If they would both reach, I would actually go ahead and hook up both to the same pump, but I don't think I can quite get it there. I'll have to look in the interior and see how that's routed. And we're back under the Lotus. Got to do a little bit of a wiring change because the 044 pump we're using has a much bigger positive connector on it than the stock pump did. The ground wires, which are the black ones, are the same size, so those will go right on. That's no big deal. But I've got to cut these off and crimp on something a little bit bigger. There we go. If you do any electrical work on cars at all, get a real set of crimpers. Don't use pliers. Don't use the crappy crimper that's built into the universal stripper, cutter, everything tool that comes in a little cheap electrical connector set from the parts store. Get a real set of crimpers. You can get them at Home Depot or Lowe's. Usually about 20 bucks, but they'll save you a lot of headache in electrical connection issues in the future. We've had cars at ATS literally shipped across the country for us to fix and diagnose, and it turns out it's because the installer only had a set of pliers on them at the time when they installed the part. Okay, that's one. Let's do the other. So there's two fuel pump circuits on the Lotus. But I looked at the wiring and they're run exactly at the same time. So I can do this with just one, but since I made the wire reach, I'm gonna go ahead and hook up both fuel pump circuits. There's two separate relays, but like I said, they're both activated by the exact same thing on the ECU. It's all in parallel. So when one pump's on, the other pump's on, vice versa. There's never, in the wiring, there's never a situation where you would only have one pump working. Squeeze this over. To trim that later so I can get that little boot on there. That's the downside of running both wires, is I won't be able to get the little boots installed. And that's the wrong nut, and that's the right nut. I think that is a 5/16. I'm gonna have a 9/32 on here, so it's not quite there. This is a 5/16. We're not gonna hit this real hard. Perfect. And now the positive side. That one has more slack. I should have done it first. Oh, I looked in the wiring, and apparently the fuel pumps always have power to them. The fuel pump relay actually only controls the ground side of the fuel pump connection. So if I had a meter, I could technically test this, and if the battery were connected, which is not, these two wires should actually be live. That's really surprising to me. Well, we almost got it without dropping it. I'm gonna do the same thing and just tap it with the impact, just because I don't have a socket or ratchet down here. Cool. Slightly deformed it because of the little red plastic piece on there, but we got a solid connection. We're happy. Okay, now I got to come back and tighten all these fuel pump fittings, put some gas in the car, hook up the battery, and see if we can actually get the car to start with the key for the first time. The same problem I ran into before. It's tightening between this check valve and the banjo fitting, but the check valve itself is actually still a little bit loose on the pump. So I'm gonna go grab a socket to tighten that. The fuel system's all buttoned up down here. I just remembered that I need to go reinstall the return line on the CIS airflow meter so that the fuel returns into the tank instead of into the external tank we were using. So here is some fun with corrosion. The brown wire, it goes to the fuel pump and has continuity up to the fuse that feeds the fuel pump. The brown wire does not have continuity to this battery post. Our first taste of gasoline in probably 20 years. In the episode where we got the car running, it was really lean, and I had to actually force the airflow meter open by hand myself. And the number one cause for that to happen on a CIS type car or any airflow meter car is some sort of vacuum leak between the airflow meter, which is here in this diagram, and the intake manifold. So luckily, Lotus gave us this diagram right here on the hatchback so we can trace all the vacuum lines and see if we found a leak. I've already found that this hose right here, which should go to the crankcase vent, is missing, I believe, this little square block. I'm not sure. And this hose is completely open. And that's going to be a fairly large leak because I think it's a 3/8 or a 5/16 inch hose. So instead of drawing this little flapper door open, it'll just suck air, because this connects actually below the flapper door. It'll just suck air through there. And so that's unmetered air that gets to the engine. So the airflow meter doesn't add the appropriate amount of fuel. The other thing we're going to do is connect to the warm-up regulator, which is not shown in this diagram, but it lives over in this neighborhood here. And we're going to check what they call control pressure, which is the, let's call it the damper setting for the airflow meter. And a high control pressure is what you want with a warm engine, because it makes the airflow meter harder to move. So you get a leaner air-fuel mixture. With a colder engine, you want a lower control pressure so that this moves quite easy and you get a richer mixture. And there's a graph in the repair manual that shows you what the range should be for those settings. So I'm going to spend a little more time tracing vacuum leaks, and then we'll see if we can get that hooked up, and then we'll try and start the car again. Whew. How many vacuum leaks? The clearest answer would be all of them. Every single one of these hoses had been cut off, chewed off, otherwise dry rotted off, usually in some hidden spot that you couldn't see. So I had to trace a bunch of them. A bunch of them actually come from the engine and disappear into the sail panel. And you can see those screws there. They hold a series of vacuum relays and boost transducer, overboost switch, etc. So I had to reach back in there and verify all the connections were good. I would say about 90% of them were bad back there. And then there's some other stuff that runs across the top of the fuel tank, which is underneath that mess. And those were bad too. So I've had enough stuff here at the house to get everybody connected, except this one little plastic hard line here. It doesn't go to that relay box. That's supposed to be running back into the engine bay. Anyway, it is the air conditioning, like heater valves. So you switch between defrost and foot or face or whatever. So that's not gonna work yet, but I don't think we're worried about that at this point in time. Well, it runs and it starts with its key now. You don't have to hot wire it. That's not entirely true. I had to run a jumper wire between the battery and the fuel pump fuse to get power to the fuel pumps. But it starts and it runs, and even though I fixed 15 or more vacuum leaks, it's still idling really lean. It'll start and run for a little bit. Eventually it dies because it's so lean. And if you walk around and press the airflow meter door open a little bit more, it idles really smooth, and it's a pretty happy car. But for some reason, still, our air-fuel ratios are way off. So my plan to check the warm-up control pressure kind of went out the door. I thought maybe I'd fixed enough vacuum leaks that it would run right on its own. That turned out to be wrong. And now I've got the car too warm to correctly check the warm-up regulator control pressure. So that's going to have to wait till our next episode. So thanks for watching. I really appreciate all the comments, and like and share, and we'll keep doing this as we try to bring this Swamp Thing Lotus back to life. The motor's really warm, probably the warmest we've got it. We're all the way up to operating temp, but not quite enough to turn on the front fans, but definitely hot enough that the entire engine bay smells like burning rat air. It's really gross. This is how I ran the fuel return line for now. I zip tied it to this funnel and then stuck the funnel into the filler neck. And that way I could visually look and see this hose to verify the fuel pump was operating. I did this before I ever got the fuel pump to turn on. It turns out that an external Bosch 044 on a CIS injection system is loud enough that you can tell when it's running just with your ears. As if not running right after fixing all the vacuum leaks wasn't enough of a problem, I look underneath as I'm gathering up tools and I find 3 fuel leaks. One looks to be the pre-filter. I tightened that up. I think that's actually fixed now. Looks like there's a little bit of a drop on the fuel filter right there in the middle, and unfortunately it looks like the accumulator diaphragm is bad, as I see fuel appears to be coming out the back of the accumulator. So I'm gonna have to order one of those this week. So that is definitely enough for today. Okay, I promise this is the last one. This is actually my third or fourth take of this video. So I'm hyper focused on this because I really feel like we're on the verge of getting this thing to run right. And I just felt like I've been missing something. So I went ahead and I connected the pressure gauge to the warm-up regulator. The kit comes with a special banjo bolt that has a little pressure fitting on it, quick connect. And so you connect that, and then that goes up to this gauge, and this tells us our control pressure. The motor's not running, and I've got a leak at the accumulator, so it's not going to tell us anything. It's just going to drop to 0. But when the motor is running, it shows a control pressure of almost 90 psi. So I looked in the manual to find out what the proper warm control pressure is supposed to be, and it's supposed to be about 45 to 47 psi, so we're way up there. Another cool feature of this gauge is it has this little bleeder valve, which you actually use to test your fuel pump capacity and whatnot, but I used it to manually adjust the control pressure. So I basically pumped the switch to try and get like a duty cycle or something to relieve some of that pressure. And I found out that when you get it down to 0 control pressure, the engine does get too rich. And if I can kind of keep it right in the middle, it does seem to run pretty well. The other thing I noticed is my gasoline that went in clear and pretty is coming out looking like this. So I don't know if we still had some contamination in the tanks. I mean, I'm sure we do. It hadn't had fluid in there. Plus there was me that put the water in, and I put the water in the driver's side tank, and it ran over through the transfer pipe, and I only drained the driver's side tank. So in hindsight, I may have had a little bit of water left in the passenger side tank. So I'm thinking that when I filled up from this side, some of the gasoline ran over to the other side, mixed with the water, and then it all reached an equilibrium, and there's some water in my gas. So I actually pulled the return line and was running it into the bucket, and it looks like this. I think the gas is floated to the top, and that clear spot in the middle, I think, is water. So I guess that's good news that it doesn't seem like that much. I'm gonna let it sit a little longer and see if it separates, and then I gotta figure out a way to separate gas from water. So what I think I'll do is get more gas, because obviously that would dilute the problem. So if I fill the tanks up, because right now I think I'm probably dealing with maybe a quart of water mixed across maybe 3 gallons of gas. So I think if I put in, say, 8 more gallons of gas, then that reduces the percentage of water. So the other thing I can do is let it sit a little bit, and the gas will float to the top, the water will be at the bottom, and then I can pull the drain plug that's in the bottom of the tank and drain off the water. When I start seeing fresh gas, close the plug. At least it sounds good in theory. It probably just ends up taking a gas bath. We'll find out soon enough. Thanks for watching, and I'm going to close out this episode for, I think, the third and final time. So a little bit of information. I poured off the, yeah, I know I said the episode was over. Like I said, hyper-focused. So I let this settle for a little bit, and then I poured off what was on top. That would be the gasoline. And the stuff in the bottom is actually brown, rusty water. So I was definitely right about that. So having water in your gas will definitely make your engine run on the lean side. So that part of the problem will probably work itself out as I get the water out of the system. And then I'm gonna obviously work on the warm-up regulator. So thanks one more time for watching, and if you enjoy it, please like and subscribe, leave a comment. I really enjoy reading them, and you guys are really keeping me motivated to stay on top of this project, even when you only get a third of what you wanted to get done in one day.